It's a music business cliche that the second album is the difficult one. The truth is that they all are, especially when the singer writes the songs and produces the record as well. The album we're about to hear was the artist's fifth, and it certainly wasn't easy. The year is 1985, and our classic album is the Hounds of Love. Looking back with me for the next hour is Kate Bush.
I think it was probably the most difficult stage I've been at so far. Because the Dreaming, the album before, I'd never produced an album before that one, and because it had a lot of unfavourable attention from some people, I think it was felt that me producing Hounds of Love wasn't such a good idea. And for the first time, I felt I was actually meeting resistance artistically. I felt the album had done very well to reach number 3, but I felt under a lot of pressure, and I wanted to stay as close to my work as possible. And everyone was saying, oh, she's really gone mad now. You know, hey, listen to this. It's a really weird record. But it was very important that it happened to me, because it made me think, right, do I really want to produce my own stuff? You know, do I really care about being famous? And I was very pleased with myself that, no, it didn't matter as much as making a good album. So we started Hounds of Love in our own studio, and I started to find out an awful lot of things that I wouldn't have realised otherwise. I relaxed tremendously within my own environment for a start. And also on the Dreaming, because I was working in such an experimental way, the studio costs were becoming absolutely phenomenal, and I really don't think I could have afforded to have made Hounds of Love in a commercial setup. So here I was in a situation of having as much creative control, really, as I could ever ask for. I had an idea of what I wanted to say in the song, and I actually asked Del to write me a drum pattern, and he wrote this great pattern in the drum machine. So I just put the Fairlight on top of it, and that was the basis of the song, with the drone, which played quite an important part. I was trying to say that really a man and a woman can't understand each other because we are a man and a woman, and if we could actually swap each other's roles, if we could actually be in each other's place for a while, I think we'd both be very surprised, and I think it would lead to a greater understanding. And really the only way I could think it could be done was either, you know, I thought a deal with the devil, you know, and I thought, well, no, why not a deal with God, you know, because in a way it's so much more powerful, the whole idea of asking God to make a deal with you. You see, for me, it is still called Deal with God. That was its title. But we were told that if we kept this title, that it wouldn't be played in any of the religious countries. So Italy wouldn't play it, France wouldn't play it, Australia wouldn't play it, Ireland wouldn't play it, and that generally we might get it blacked purely because it had God in the title. Now, I couldn't believe this. This seemed completely ridiculous to me, and the title was such a part of the song's entity. I just couldn't understand it. But nonetheless, although I was very unhappy about it, I felt unless I compromised that I was going to be cutting my own throat. You know, I just spent 2-3 years making an album, and we weren't going to get this record played on the radio if I was stubborn. So I felt I had to be grown up about this. So we changed it to Running Up That Hill. But it's always something I've regretted doing, I must say. And normally I always regret any compromises that I make. Hounds of Love. Well, again, this was written at home. This was an early song. And it was inspired in some ways by this old black and white movie that it's a real favourite of ours called Night of the Demon. It's all about this demon that appears in the trees. And the line at the top of the song, it's in the trees, it's coming, is actually taken from the film. Maurice Denham is the guy that's saying it. When I was writing the song, I sort of started coming across this line about hounds. And I thought, Hounds of Love, you know, the whole idea of being chased by this love that's actually going to, when it gets you, it's just going to rip you to pieces, you know, and have your guts all over the floor. And so this very sort of, you know, being hunted by love. I liked the imagery. I thought it was really good. Big Sky was very difficult to write. I knew what I wanted to finish up with, but I didn't seem to be able to get there. And we had 3 different versions. And eventually it just kind of turned into what it did, thank goodness. That was really about, you know, the thing of when I used to do it a lot when I was a kid. We'd go out somewhere and sit up and look at the sky, and if you watch the clouds long enough, they take on different shapes. You know, you can see dinosaurs in them or castles. And at the time I was writing this album, we were living in the country, and my keyboards and stuff were in this room overlooking a valley, and I'd sit and watch the clouds rolling uphill towards me. And there is a lot of weather on this album. The countryside was a big inspiration at this time, and it's always changing. It's a very different perspective from living in a city. Sometimes you hardly see the sky above the buildings at all.
The big sky. Kate had first used a Fairlight on her third album, Never Forever, and by the time she made Hounds of Love, it had become a key element in the creative process.
I'd say with this album that most of the songs were written on Fairlight and synth, and not piano, which was moving away really from the earlier albums where all my material was written on piano. And there is something about the character of a sound. You hear a sound and it has a whole quality of its own, that it can be sad or happy, and that immediately conjures up images which can of course help you to think of ideas that lead you on to a song. So everything is crucial for trying to find some direction with inspiration, and really sounds now I think are pieces of gold for people. You know, a good sound is worth a lot artistically. Quite often I find synthetic sounds create a coldness that if the track is lonely or sad or dark, sometimes you want that kind of coldness, that machine-like coldness, which is very specific. And with acoustic instruments, you get normally a very warm human presence, and something that's intimate and really there, something that breathes. You know, it's not this kind of dead, cold machine. And I feel that both are very usable, depending on what you want to say.
How about Mother Stands for Comfort, for instance?
Well, the personality that sings this track is very unfeeling in a way, and the cold qualities of synths and machines were appropriate here. There are many different kinds of love, and the track's really talking about the love of a mother, and in this case, she's the mother of a murderer, in that she's basically prepared to protect her son against anything. Because in a way it's also suggesting that the son is using the mother as much as the mother is protecting him. It's a bit of a strange subject matter, isn't it, really?
Mother Stands for Comfort. Our classic album is The Hounds of Love by Kate Bush, and the next track is Cloudbusting.
This was very special to me because it was all inspired by a book that I'd found years ago. And I went into a bookshop I used to go into regularly and just saw this. I liked the title. It said A Book of Dreams, and took the book off the shelf. I'd never done it before, an unknown book. And it was this beautiful story by this guy called Peter Reich. And it's all about his view of his father, but through the eyes of a child. So it was all about his childhood and how he saw his father as this incredibly magical figure. And his father was Wilhelm Reich, and he was a very respected psychoanalyst, I believe. But his work became controversial, and he was eventually arrested and died in prison. But one of the things that features in the book is how he used to go with his father cloudbusting. And his father had this machine that when you pointed it up to the sky, you could make the clouds disperse, or you could gather them together. And if you gathered them together, it would rain. And the machine was all based on orgone energy, which was one of the basis of Reich's teachings. And the book is just extraordinary. It's so sad, but it's also got this beautiful kind of happy innocence that goes with childhood. And as the guy grows up in the book, it does get sadder and sadder as you can feel him hanging on to his childhood. And the book really touched me, and the song is really trying to tell that story. That did all fall apart over a period of about 10 bars, and everything just started falling apart because it didn't end properly, and the drummer would stop, and then the strings would just sort of start wiggling around and talking, and I felt it needed an ending, and I didn't really know what to do. And then I thought maybe decoy tactics were the way, and we covered the whole thing over with the sound of a steam engine slowing down, so that you had the sense of the journey coming to an end. And it worked. It covered up all the falling apart and actually made it sound very complete in a way. And we had terrible trouble getting a sound effect of a steam train. So we actually made up the sound effect out of various sounds, and Del was the steam. And, we got a whistle on the Fairlight for the poo-poo.
The continuous flow of music on a compact disc masks the fact that Hounds of Love and the Ninth Wave were conceived as two quite separate sides to the album.
Yes, they were. I started off writing, I think, Running Up That Hill, Hounds of Love, and then I think probably Dream of Sheep. And once I wrote that, that was it. That was the beginning of what then became the concept. And really, for me, from the beginning, the Ninth Wave was a film. That's how I thought of it. It's the idea of this person being in the water. How they've got there, we don't know, but the idea is that they've been on a ship and they've been washed over the side, so they're alone in this water. Now, I find that horrific imagery, the thought of being completely alone in all this water. And they've got a life jacket on with a little light, so that if anyone should be travelling at night, they'll see the light and know they're there. And they're absolutely terrified, and they're completely alone at the mercy of their imagination, which again I personally find such a terrifying thing, the power of one's own imagination being let loose on something like that. And the idea that they've got it in their head that they mustn't fall asleep, because if you fall asleep when you're in the water, I've heard that you roll over and so you drown, so they're trying to keep themselves awake. This was all kind of coming together by itself. I didn't have much to do with this. I just sat down and wrote this little tune on the Fairlight with the cello sound, and it sounded very operatic, and I thought, well, great, because it conjured up the image of ice, and it was really simple to record. I mean, we did the whole thing in a day, I guess. Again, it's very lonely. It's terribly lonely. They're all alone on like this frozen lake. And at the end of it, it's the idea of seeing themselves under the ice in the river. So I mean, we're talking real nightmare stuff here. And at this point, when they say, my God, it's me, it's me under the ice, these sort of visitors come to wake them up, to bring them out of this dream so that they don't drown.
Wake up.
My mother's in there, my father, my brothers Paddy and John, Brian Tench, the guy that mixed the album with us, is in there, Daryl's in there, Robbie Coltrane does one of the voices. It was just trying to get lots of different characters and all the ways that people wake you up.
You must wake
like,
up.
when you sort of fall asleep at your desk at school and the teacher says,
Wake up.
couldn't get a helicopter anywhere. And in the end, I asked permission to use the helicopter from the wall, from the Floyd. This is the best helicopter I'd heard for years. I think it's very interesting, the whole concept of witch hunting and the fear of women's power. In a way, it's very sexist behaviour, and I feel that female intuition and instincts are very strong and are still put down, really. And in this song, this woman is being persecuted by the witch hunter and a whole jury, although she's committed no crime, and they're trying to push her under the water to see if she'll sink or float. Ooh,
You're listening to Classic Albums with me, Richard Skinner, and Kate Bush. And the next track on Hounds of Love is Watching You Without Me.
Now, this poor sod has been in the water for hours and been witch hunted and everything. Suddenly they're kind of at home, in spirit, seeing their loved one, sitting there waiting for them to come home. And, watching the clock and obviously very worried about where they are, maybe making phone calls and things. But there's no way that you can actually communicate because they can't see you, they can't hear you. And I find this really horrific. These are all like my own personal worst nightmares, I guess, put into song. And when we started putting the track together, I had this idea for these backing vocals, you can't hear me. And I thought that maybe to disguise them so that, you couldn't actually hear what the backing vocals were saying.
Watching You Without Me. Next is Jig of Life.
At this point in the story, it's the future self of this person coming to visit them, to give them a bit of help here. I mean, it's about time they had a bit of help. So it's their future self saying, look, don't give up, you've got to stay alive, because if you don't stay alive, that means I don't, and I'm alive, I've had kids, I've been through years and years of life, so you have to survive, you mustn't give up. This was written in Ireland. At one point, I did quite a lot of writing in Ireland, lyrically particularly, and again, it was a tremendous sort of elemental dose I was getting, all this beautiful countryside, and spending a lot of time outside and walking, so I had this tremendous sort of stimulus from the outside. And this was one of the tracks that the Irish musicians that we worked with was featured on. There was a tune that my brother Paddy found, which he said, you've got to hear this, you'll love it, and he was right. He played it to me, and I just thought, this would be fantastic somehow to incorporate here. We had the whole song, it was all there, but these huge great holes in the choruses, and I knew I wanted to put something in there, and I'd had this idea to put a vocal piece in there that was like this traditional tune I'd heard used in the film Nosferatu, and really everything I came up with, it was rubbish really compared to what this piece was saying. So we did some research to find out if it was possible to use it, and it was, so that's what we did. We re-recorded the piece, and I kind of made up words that sounded like what I could hear was happening on the original. And suddenly there were these beautiful voices in these choruses that had just been like two black holes. And it was the idea of turning the whole thing upside down and looking at it from completely above. I had that image of if you were lying in water at night and you were looking up at the sky all the time. I wonder if you wouldn't get the sense of, as the stars were reflected in the water, a sense of like, you could be looking up at water that's reflecting the stars from the sky that you're in. And the idea of them looking down at the earth and seeing these storms forming over America and moving around the globe, and they have this like huge, fantastically overseeing view of everything. Everything is in total perspective, and way, way down there somewhere there's this little dot in the ocean that is them.
The ninth wave song sequence concludes with The Morning Fog.
Well, that's really meant to be the rescue of the whole situation, where now, suddenly out of all this darkness and weight comes light. The weightiness is gone, and here's the morning. And it's meant to feel very positive and bright and uplifting from the very sort of dense darkness of the previous track. And although it doesn't say so in my mind, this was the song where they were rescued, where they get pulled out of the water. And it's very much a song of seeing perspective, of really, of being so grateful for everything that you have, that you're never grateful of in ordinary life because you just abuse it totally. So, and it was also meant to be one of those kind of thank you and good night songs. The little finale where everyone does a little dance and then a bow and then they leave the stage. I've never been so pleased to finish anything in my life. There were times I never thought it'd be finished. It was just such a lot of work. All of it was so much work, the lyrics, trying to piece the thing together. But I did love it, I did enjoy it, and everyone that worked on the album was wonderful. And it was really, in some ways, I think, the happiest I've been when I've been writing and making an album. And I know there's a big theory that goes around that you must suffer for your art, it's not real art unless you suffer. And I don't believe this. Because I think, in some ways, this is the most complete work that I've done. In some ways, it is the best. And I was the happiest that I've been compared to making other albums.
Classic Albums is produced by John Pigeon. I'm Richard Skinner. Our special thanks to Kate Bush.
BBC